What's up, guys? So today I'm just going to be talking about the basics of shooting, or shooting for beginners basically. So I'm going to dive right into it. There are certain elements you need to know before you pick up a camera. So if you don't know these elements, like you don't even you just be shooting, or you just know, okay, only one format and you only know how to use this particular camera, but you don't really know what you're doing, right? I know the feeling if you're just starting out. And also, if your foundation isn't strong, you might actually have issues with cameras. All right, so let me just get right into it. There are certain elements you need to have mastered. I'll call them basic elements, but you kind of like interchange between them when you're using, because you need to be fast with it when you're operating a camera. So you have aperture, ISO, what else? Frame rate, and I think just three. Yeah. Now, another thing I noticed is, before I even get right into it, one thing I noticed is that some people that have photography knowledge try to maneuver their way into shooting videos without really understanding how those elements I mentioned earlier works when you're shooting videos with a camera. All right. Everything I'm saying right now is not for photography, it's for videography. Some people just, man, I see some photographers trying to come into video making, and they try, that's what I said, they try to put the knowledge they have in photography into videography. And when I see those videos, I'm like, man, if you just knew this, there's no way you would have shot it this way. Okay, so let's get right into it, because honestly, with this knowledge you can work with any camera. I'm not just saying it out of ignorance. No, I'm very, very serious. Without this basic knowledge, I don't even see you operating any camera the right way. All right, so aperture, the way aperture works, you have f-stops from about, I think the lowest is about 1.2 thereabouts, and to the highest, I don't know, 22, 24, I really don't know. But like these ranges, what they do is that when you have an aperture of 1.2, you have this narrow depth of field. Okay, so the background is kind of like blurry and it's very, very focused on the subject. Or it can be the other way around. The foreground is blurry and it's focused on the background, that kind of thing. While when you have it the other way around, maybe on the highest aperture, everything is clear. There's no depth of field. I know normally when you're shooting, you always, anytime you're shooting anything and it's like it's cinematic, there's depth of field. Don't get too deep into this. Every shot must have depth of field. Nah, I'm digressing away from what I'm trying to say, but it's just like a tip. Please don't get obsessed with every shot must have this depth of field where the background is kind of crisp and it's completely focused on the subject. Nah, that's not filmmaking. But back to what I'm trying to say, back to the basics. And also, when the f-stop is low, f-stop is what's used for aperture. When it's low, you'd have a lot of light coming into the camera. So it depends on the environment that you are shooting that would affect the kind of aperture you are using. But there are certain elements you can use to aid you if like you have the aperture on like 1.2 now and there's depth of field and all, but the light is just too much for the image. So the image is blown out and don't think, oh, when I take it to post, I'm going to start reducing the light. No. There's a certain limit to where your footage can go to that you've just destroyed it. All you do is you increase the aperture to about like 4.5, 5.6, hopefully, or you get an ND filter so that you can still work with it. Okay, and the other way around too, if the aperture is high and you can see and everything is clear, there's no depth of field, the lightning coming into the lens is also cut down like significantly and to be dark. And that pushes me to the next one, ISO. ISO basically has to just do with the light in the camera. Yeah, it's like an artificial light that helps you forget about the kind of lightning that is coming from the external source. This is internal for the camera. So the higher the ISO, the brighter the image. But note that there's a certain limit to where you can take the ISO to, that noise will start affecting the image. Now, noise, what I mean by noise is that the image will start having this grain on it and it won't be as clear and crisp as you would love your image to look like. So you also have to be very vigilant when you're shooting and you're increasing the ISO. Maybe you get to a dark environment, try your best to get that place lit enough. Do not depend on ISO. I repeat, do not depend on ISO. ISO just should come in when there is no hope of getting the environment lit enough. All right. So that's ISO. ISO basically just has to do with how bright or dark you want your image to be from the camera, not the external source of light. And the third one and the most important one for videography is frame rate. Frame rate is the third one. And the way frame rate works is you have the standard one. So as I'm recording right now, I'm recording on a 24 frames per second. Okay. You have the standard one, like the way I'm talking right now. Either is on 23, 24, I think 25 to 30 and 30. Yeah, around that. That's the normal standard frame rate per second, where it's recording exactly the way it should be like in a normal situation. Nothing is faster than it's supposed to be, nothing is slower than it's supposed to be. So in any normal scenario that you're recording, you record in those frame rates I mentioned earlier. But when you're trying to switch things up a bit, I mean, you're a director or you're a filmmaker or a video content creator, you want to switch some clips, everything, you don't want everything to just be normal and I won't say boring, but you don't want everything to just be normal. You have now another thing is, please don't be offended. I'm just going through all this like that. Just what advice I'll give right now, like be jotting down what I'm talking about so you can do more research. But I'm trying to give you the basic foundation because you might not find all this in one video. Most of the time it's just be specific searches that will get to the best details on this. So back to what I'm trying to say. The frame rates now, if you increase your frame rate to about like 50 frame rates per second, what happens is that things will be moving faster than they're supposed to. I'm sure you might have noticed it on your phone. Some people might not even go on as far as checking the camera settings on their phone. But if you notice, maybe you picked up maybe a friend's phone, and you notice that the image, when you move the camera like this, the image is faster than on another phone. Things like that. I'm talking about people that have not used camera before, but if you use a camera before, you should know what I'm talking about. The frame rates for the way it works in Hollywood and all is like they take it up to like 120, 240, and the image will be so slow. But for DSLR cameras, the way this thing works is a bit different, because in DSLR cameras, when you shoot on high frame rate per second, it doesn't automatically adjust it to be slow. The reason why you shoot in high frame rate per second is so that the clip will be slow. But this time around, it will be fast so that it gives you enough room to slow it down. But when you shoot in high-end cameras like Red, Arri, cameras that are not DSLR cameras, they're just strictly video cameras. When you shoot on a high frame rate, it automatically slows it down for you. Pro tip. This is a pro tip. If you shoot in 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, and you're using a DSLR camera, you can slow down the clip to have it move in a very, very professional way. Unlike when some people would record on 23 frames per second or 30 frames per second, they take it into Premiere Pro and they try to slow it down and it starts cracking and it's horrible. It's horrible. You can tell an amateur from a pro just with that simple thing I explained. If you didn't get it, rewind it back a bit and listen to what I said. Basically, and if you're trying to like get what I'm trying to say on that, I have a video on how to slow down your clip with frame rates per seconds. I'll put it up. Yeah, it should be up. I'll put it up. If it's not there, check the link below. You'll see the link to it. I'll upload the video the same day I upload this, so that at least you'll be able to see and understand what I meant by that point. Now, there's one thing I forgot to mention: shutter speed. Very, very important. Now, when you are shooting, it's like there's a rule of thumb for videography. Whatever your frame rate is, your shutter speed should be double. Okay? So if your frame rate is 23, your shutter speed should be 46, but most likely you won't see 46, so it will be 50, but you get the point. Your shutter speed should be double of your frame rate so as not to cause any wrong thing happening when you're recording your image. Also for shutter speed, you know, I said earlier that your shutter speed, like rule of thumb, has to be twice of your frame rate, but you can also play with it as usual. There's always an exception. So if you take your shutter speed low, and normally shutter speed works about like 1 over a certain value, so that certain value under is the one you should be looking in reference to your frame rates that you're doubling. So, you know, I said frame rate like maybe 23 frames per second. The shutter speed will be 1/46, but not, there's no 1/46, it's 1/50. Now, if you take your shutter speed lower than your frame rate, you will start having slow movements of like, so you'll be seeing like lights and like the image will be kind of like blurry and all. While if you take your shutter speed up, like really up, the image would have this high impact kind of imagery. So that's what like all these Hollywood we're using like for the action scenes of their movie or for like sports commercial. So there are certain situations where you break the rule. But I'm just telling you in an ideal situation, you use the shutter speed. Shutter speed is twice the frame rate, all right? Whew. I think I covered it. Let me just roll through what I said. So jot down these points, and hopefully what I said earlier in the video, you got basic ideas and all this. Aperture, ISO, frame rate, shutter speed. You know how they work. I don't see you not being able to function with any camera. It's just now, okay, maybe there are certain things that are specific to this certain camera, but when you know how to operate those things, you are good to go. It's now just for you to master the equipment that you're with, or like I said earlier, specific things to that camera. Wow, this is really enlightening for those that don't even have any prior knowledge on how to use a camera. I know this can be overwhelming, but this is a foundation that if you don't get it right, you're going to regret it, or you're going to just be having a hard time shooting with a camera. All right, there's so much that goes into filmmaking. Like, honestly, there's a lot, but just for today, let's just stick with this simple thing I spoke about today. So I hope this video was helpful. As usual, please click on the like button, subscribe, share, and keep learning. Peace out.